If your last name is or Mendes or Lopes or Nunes, there's a version of your family's story you were never told. It is written down and you can still read it. Mendes, Lopes, Nunes, Pinto, Franco, Castro. 10 surnames carried by millions of people today. One legal category, enforced for 277 years. The first one belonged to a playwright a king personally applauded. It comes from a real register of Portugal's Inquisition courts, compiled in 1784 and published in full only in 2008. Almost nobody covering Sephardic surnames has actually opened it. So that is what we are doing today, not whether your surname sounds Portuguese or Jewish, what one specific court actually wrote down about the people it tried. Stay to the end. One name in that record belonged to a young playwright whose comedies made a king laugh out loud. The same government that watched his plays lit the fire. But first, I have to take something away from you. Alone is one of the most common surnames in the entire Portuguese-speaking world. Millions of and Lopes descend from families who were always Catholic and never once appeared before an inquisitor. The sound of a name proves nothing by itself. What actually proves something is one specific kind of paper, a trial record, a genealogy submitted for inspection, a name inside one exact court in one exact decade. And that is the strange turn at the center of this whole story. Once someone was baptized, the state could no longer see what they actually believed, so it started reading lineage instead. It started reading names. So think about the name you sign without thinking, the one on every form you have ever filled out. Do you know which court, if any, your family's name passed through? Hold that thought. December the 5th, 1496. King, the first of Portugal, signs an order tied to his own marriage contract with the Spanish crown. Convert or leave, the order said. Then the king closed nearly every port so people could not actually leave. Children under 14 were taken from families who chose exile and raised as Catholics elsewhere in the kingdom. By October of that year, the Jews who remained were baptized whether they consented or not. Overnight, on paper, an entire community became Catholic. A new legal label appeared for them, New Christian. But a signature on a baptism register does not erase 10 centuries of a separate community living beside you. Old Christians noticed, and they did not forget. April 9, 1506, Lisbon. A mob blamed the New Christians for a drought and a plague, and killed roughly 2,000 of them in 3 days. 30 years later, on May 23, 1536, Pope III authorized what the Portuguese crown had been requesting for years, its own Inquisition. Historians have reconstructed the full ledger. Out of 31,457 cases, about 4% ended at the stake. Most people were penanced and released, but every single one of those cases left a written file. Here is where your surname actually enters the story. Baptism was supposed to erase the distinction entirely. In practice, it built a second system on top of it. Blood purity statutes locked New Christian families out of public office, the universities, the military orders, and marriage into families considered Old Christian. And proving you belonged on the right side of that line required one thing, a written genealogy. From 1530 onward, every man applying to marry could be required to submit his family's names for inspection. Clerks those names into registers over and over for generations. That system ran from 1496 until 1773 and 1774, when the Marquis of Reforms finally abolished it. Do the math. That is 277 years of your family's name being legal evidence. The trial records behind those genealogies were compiled into one manuscript in 1784. It sat in a private library for over 2 centuries. In December 2008, it was finally published in full, transcribed and indexed by surname. You can search it today for free through the Jewish Historical Society of England. Have you ever actually typed your own last name into a real court archive? So here is what happened to specific people carrying 5 of these 10 names, not guesses, documented lives. Luna was baptized into the Mendes banking family and fled Lisbon soon after the Inquisition arrived. Under her Jewish name, Mendes, she built the largest escape network conversos ever had. Using her family's trade routes across Europe, she smuggled hundreds of new Christian families out of Portugal and Spain, from Antwerp to Venice to Istanbul, at her own expense. Lopes left Portugal for London and became personal physician to Queen Elizabeth I of England. In 1594, he was executed, accused of plotting to poison her. Historians still argue over whether the charge was even true. What is not argued is that a Portuguese New Christian surname was treating the Queen of England, decades after his family had supposedly stopped being anything but Catholic. Would you have trusted your own physician a little less if you had known his family's history? Isaac Castro grew up Catholic in Portuguese Brazil, learned his family's real history as a young man, and traveled to Dutch Amsterdam specifically to become openly Jewish again. In 1647 he was captured, tried in Lisbon, and burned at the stake at around 25 years old. He had crossed an ocean to reclaim a name his own grandparents had been forced to hide. Ask yourself what you would risk to say your own family's real name out loud. Pinto, Franco, Nunes, every one of these names appears case after case in the same court dockets. When a defendant was handed to secular authorities for execution, the clerk wrote a single word beside the name. Not every Nunes met that word. Hector Nunes, a different member of that same surname, built a career as a merchant and physician in London and was the first to bring England confirmed news that the Spanish Armada had been defeated. Same surname, same century, two completely different endings. One trusted with a nation's most important news. That is exactly why the record matters more than the name. If you only had the surname to go on, could you have guessed which Nunes was which? Now the playwright, was born in Portuguese Brazil in 1705, into a family already living under suspicion. In 1712, his mother was denounced to the Inquisition in. The family crossed the Atlantic to Lisbon, so his father could face the tribunal there instead. In 1726, at 21 years old, was imprisoned alongside his mother and put to torture. He confessed to following Jewish practice. The confession and nothing else is what kept him alive. Released, he finished his law degree and turned to writing. Between 1733 and 1738, his comic operas, performed by marionettes at a small theater in Lisbon, became the hit of the season. King V himself is recorded attending. For 5 years, the most watched playwright in the Portuguese capital was a man who had already survived the Inquisition's torture chamber once. In 1734, he married his cousin, Maria. Her own parents had already been burned by the Inquisition. She knew exactly what the fire looked like. Would you have married into that family, knowing what you now know? So picture that marriage, two people who had both watched the Inquisition take a parent, choosing each other anyway, while his plays packed a Lisbon theater every week. On October 5, 1737, someone in their own household denounced them to the Holy Office. Husband and wife were both arrested on the charge of secretly practicing Judaism. Think about how many people could have denounced you if the reward was simply not being suspected yourself. The complete trial record still exists and has been published. It shows friends testifying under oath to his sincere Catholic devotion. It shows the accusations contradicting each other. It shows a death sentence anyway. On October 18, 1739, was strangled, then his body was burned in an auto-da. He was 34 years old. His wife watched and did not long survive him. His comedies were republished and performed for decades afterward, printed under the same name the court had just burned. Lisbon kept laughing at his jokes while it forgot, or chose to forget, why he was gone. So why keep a system running for 277 years, long after anyone seriously believed it was rooting out secret Jews? Ask yourself who actually benefited. The moment someone was arrested, their property was seized, and new Christian families were disproportionately merchants and bankers, which made them, quite simply, the wealthiest targets on the board. By the 1770s, the Marquis wanted a modern, centralized state, not a rival court running its own economy on confiscated fortunes. In 1773 and 1774, he abolished the blood purity statutes outright. Notice that mercy is almost never the reason these systems actually end. Not mainly out of mercy, mainly because a 200-year-old religious filing system had become an obstacle to running an 18th century economy, but the effect for new Christian families was real. Which brings us back to you. If you carry one of these 10 names, the real question was never whether it sounds Portuguese or Jewish or both. It is whether your family's paper trail actually runs through a courtroom like this one, or simply through a christening in a village that never once saw an inquisitor. The published register is searchable today by surname for free through the Jewish Historical Society of England, not a DNA test, an actual court file with an actual name inside it. So tell me in the comments, which of these 10 surnames sits somewhere in your family tree? Did anyone ever tell you why? If you want more of this, more real courtrooms, more names with an actual paper trail behind them, there's a lot more waiting on this channel.